Did you know that throughout most of history, royal babies were not breastfed by their mothers, but were given to wet nurses? In this painting, we see the baby Louis XV sat on the lap of his governess, and on the left here is his royal wet nurse. Neither of these women are his mother, but they were instrumental in his early years. And this is the case throughout much of history. And here we see the Duc de Bourgogne, the grandson of Louis XIV, being breastfed by his wet nurse. So the sole purpose of a royal woman or an aristocratic woman was to produce children to secure the dynasty. In order to get pregnant as many times as possible, handing over the baby as soon as it was born to a wet nurse helped her get back into the marital bed. And so, for example, we have Queen Charlotte here of the United Kingdom. Although she had 15 children, she didn't breastfeed any of them, as was the custom of the time. She was, of course, intimately involved, as were other royal women, in the selection of a wet nurse. Wet nurses would be selected from a variety of women because the position of royal wet nurse was highly sought after. It was often very well paid and they could get a pension for life afterwards. Royal wet nurses were obviously screened. It was decided whether they were healthy, whether they had had any illnesses in the past, whether the children that they were breastfeeding at the time were also healthy. And then they often moved into the palaces to be closer to the royal children. For aristocratic women, their wet nurses were often in the countryside, and so their children were sent out to the countryside and fostered until they were weaned. These wet nurses were considered healthy and sort of strong women who would give these babies a good fighting start to life. And then parents would periodically go and visit their children in the countryside. So this is a depiction of one such visit, with the mother and father visiting their little baby. However, going back to royal wet nurses, as I mentioned, this was very prestigious, and as a result, a number of portraits of them were painted. So, for example, here we see the Duc de Bourgogne right there, grandson of Louis XIV, being breastfed by his wet nurse. And here is Louis XIV being breastfed by his very proud wet nurse. She was called Dame de Longueuil, and she was not his last or his first wet nurse. Louis was born with teeth, and so he went through many wet nurses because he kept biting. So apparently this particular wet nurse didn't last that long, but she is forever immortalised as Louis XIV's wet nurse.